Welcome to the show your parents, the PTA and their sleep don't want you to hear, the Helios blog. Today, Matthew Hussey talks about how to get over narcissists, cheating and heartbreak the right way. You all know Matthew Hussey's advice giving. Let's get into it.
The reason she's alone is because she's difficult.
Women are not accepting the bare minimum.
Women fuck men they respect.
All the women who say things like, I'm strong, independent, I don't need no man, like, y'all impress me.
Women just gaslight each other and say what they want to hear.
Excited to be back. We haven't had you for a minute, Stephen.
No, we haven't.
He's been all over the world.
Balkans, Italy, Zion.
He has hair now.
With you. And now we're back in lovely England.
We're in Mum's house, in fact.
We are in our mum's house.
Yeah. We wanted to do an episode kind of talking about self-compassion and the role it plays in the aftermath of a toxic relationship, an abusive relationship.
It's really funny because Matthew makes his bread on giving girls dating advice, right? And notice how often he talks about toxic relationships, A-word relationships, bad guys, and so on. These are the only guys that girls pick. Guys that are quote-unquote bad. If you don't have some quote-unquote bad in you, I don't know what to tell you. You're going to have a bad time. Because those are the only guys that girls pick.
A narcissistic relationship and the role that accountability plays in taking ownership for that relationship.
You see, there it is, finally.
And for the way we enter into relationships in the future. And are there any limits on self-compassion? Are there any limits on accountability? How do the two fit together? I recently did a podcast with our friend Lewis Howes, who I've known for many years now. Lewis recently conducted a conversation on his podcast, The School of Greatness, between myself and Sadia Khan, who there may be people who listen to this podcast who also listen to Sadia Khan, known for dating advice, relationship advice, perhaps more geared towards men. I think it's safe to say.
Mm-hmm.
But
if she's a female dating coach, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know why you're listening to a female dating coach as a guy. They're solipsists. So how do they give you advice that's not their own perspective?
I know that there are women who listen to her too. And
indeed,
we had a conversation, some would call a debate.
It was definitely a debate.
Okay, it was definitely a debate. It wasn't pitched as a debate.
I had my popcorn.
You did?
I was
Okay.
I was watching in the green room.
I know when Lewis had us on, it wasn't kind of, Lewis had said to me, hey, this isn't a debate. We just want to hear from both of you.
Also, notice Matthew's girl, the one that he picked to marry, that British girl you heard talking or you see on the screen occasionally here. Notice her demeanor, right? Is she aggressive, argumentative, explosive, ball busting? Or is she, demure, chill, feminine, and cooperative? You tell me.
On this subject, and the subject was ostensibly cheating for that episode, and it turned out we did have quite different views on that subject and what the appropriate reaction should be from the person who had been cheated on. And
just blame all men, say men are trash, and so on. That's the appropriate response, right? Right?
I thought it was interesting. Initially I hadn't intended
Buy 20 cats
to follow up on that podcast with anything, because I kind of felt like, well, it's out there. If people want to know what I have to say, they can go and watch that podcast. And I would encourage anyone, if you want to kind of look at, how that played out, go watch that podcast. But when I read the comments under the podcast, that made me feel like it was actually worth further discussion, because it was interesting and in some cases quite surprising to see the division in the comments, and how other people felt about things I was saying, things Sadia was saying. And there were, people who agreed more with me. There were people who agreed more with Sadia. And there were, I would say there was a decent amount of misunderstanding in the comments about what was actually being expressed as well. So I know, Stephen, you've been through these comments and you've pulled out a few for us to talk about. But maybe we can start by trying to outline what maybe a couple of the causes of the division were in that conversation. Stephen, tell me if you think this is accurate, but it felt like part of it was when Lewis talked about, how we should respond to being cheated on. My first response was to go to a place of condemnation for someone having cheated, and for that.
Agreed. Cheating is unforgivable, especially girl to guy cheating is like the worst thing a girl can do. If she cheats on you, that's like the biggest form of disrespect a girl can possibly do, is to cheat. And when I say cheating, I mean women should be held to a stricter standard. If she's texting other guys, it's already relationship over. Because she is setting up another guy to get her attention, right? She's seeking that attention herself. She's seeking it for the purpose of getting with that guy, right? She's putting the gears in motion, right? That is an unforgivable offense.
Behavior and a huge degree of compassion for ourselves.
Oh, and I forgot to mention this. For a girl to love you, she must respect you. If she cheats on you, she doesn't respect you, which means she doesn't love you. For women, love and respect are the same thing.
In being in the situation on the receiving end of that behavior. And Sadia's response seemed to lean more towards a place of what could I have done differently?
Right. So it's always the man's fault if the girl cheats. Women don't have any responsibility. They're perpetually victims. They are simultaneously both superheroes and victims, as Rollo Tomasi said.
Why didn't I see this? And it very much put the focus on, how did I allow myself to get into this situation?
Yes.
Is that fair? I want to make sure I'm representing the two sides fairly.
Yes, I think that's fair. I think in that debate, I think Sadia was highlighting taking accountability for the choices we make in relationships. Maybe the kind of person you've chosen to begin with. I think she gave the example of someone who's hypersexualized, and maybe if you choose a person who's hypersexual and their needs are not fulfilled in a relationship, maybe that person is more liable to go and cheat.
That is solipsism 101, right? She assumes that men want what women want. And so she assumes that if she chooses Chad the hypersexual, in her own words, that he would choose Stacy the hypersexual. But that is not what men are like. Men choose girls that are a garden tool only for them, right? A girl that sees them as an alpha.
I don't think she was saying that makes it right, but I think she was saying we have to look inwards and maybe ask, why do I choose these kinds of people? Did I permit these kind of behaviors? What signs did I ignore early on, or red flags? And I think her point was there are always signs.
Well, yeah, that's without a doubt. That is without a doubt. A lot of men, because they're getting laid, they just accept whatever. But again, if she has a million guy friends, she's got tattoos, she does illicit substances, she has 5 dogs, she's gonna cheat on you. She's, 30 plus, what,
So I think her
bad family life
responsibility was, well, there are always signs, therefore the onus is on us to be more aware of those things early.
No, that's bullshit, right? That if she cheats on you, it's your fault? Well, okay. Jocko Willink might say that, where he says, just accept ultra responsibility. Everything in your life is your fault, right? If she cheats on you, it's your fault. But to say that women are blameless when they cheat on you is nuts, and just shows an underlying womanist, society, right? But we already knew that. It's the matriarchy.
On, rather, because her point was someone doesn't just suddenly do that 15 years into a marriage.
So I think even just to maybe use that as a jumping off point, firstly, the idea of if we choose someone who's hypersexualized, I'm not entirely sure how we define hypersexualized, but if we just say, well, we choose someone with a high sex drive, well, we ourselves could have a high sex drive.
Yeah, what's wrong with having a high sex drive? That's fine.
High sex drive doesn't have to go hand in hand with
cheating. That's right.
Lapse in morals.
No, and
that's right.
Made that point. How do you know? You might just have a partner who's giving you a great sex life, and you'll have
that's great,
having an amazing relationship. So that doesn't necessarily make you think, oh well, they have a propensity to need to go and get that met elsewhere because they're getting it met with me.
Right, and there are also plenty of people who, and I know Audrey, you've made this point in the past, or at least I've heard you make this point, that there are plenty of people who may be very sexual people, but their response to being in a relationship where they're not getting enough sex is to say, this is the wrong relationship for me.
Right. Or, they don't even start with, this is the wrong relationship. They start with, I want more, give me more. And if you don't give them more, then they'll just end the relationship, right? They won't cheat on you first.
It's not to say, therefore, let me go cheat and lie.
Although there are many girls that will do that. They have the goose that laid the golden egg, right? And because they have the goose that laid the golden egg, they don't need... they don't want to lose that, and so they just lie and cheat.
Lie and betray, and
yes,
it's actually a bit of a non sequitur in many ways. I'm not saying that the kind of, that it may not be more likely for someone with a very high sex drive or who's more promiscuous to cheat, but that's true in people who are more...
No. Promiscuous is different from high bedroom fun drive. Promiscuous means you like to sleep with multiple people, and that's your thing, right? That's a different thing than high sex drive. High sex drive just means you like doing it. Promiscuous means you like doing it with random people constantly. Two different things, actually.
More likely to have a lapse in morals. It's not just a connection that you can make for everyone, that someone really enjoys sex and therefore you better keep them entertained or they're going to cheat. That can't be the way we go into relationships.
No, and someone might have that sex drive and also have the morals to say, I'm not being fulfilled here. I think we don't have compatible sex drives, and this is a real problem, right?
Indeed.
There might be multiple conversations. That doesn't mean they're going to be dishonest, deceive you, lie, all the rest of it.
Right.
So yeah.
When you said that, Sadia mentioned there's always signs.
Yes.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree that there's always signs. And I think that oftentimes the signs reveal themselves at a point where it's actually really difficult for somebody to leave. I think often, especially with antagonistic, narcissistic, kind of antisocial types of personalities, those things tend to reveal themselves quite a lot further into the relationship.
I wonder if she's telling on herself here.
So when we're looking at it through the lens of blame and accountability, which is what this whole conversation was about, which is, you know, if you've been cheated on, there is a level, which is not your point, Matt, it was the point that Sadia was making. There's a level of accountability that you need to take for the fact that that happened, because it is a reflection of the partner that you chose. I don't know that I agree with that. I think that is, you know, that is the case for some relationships and some situations where we do ignore things from the beginning.
Let's make a mention of this while it's happening. This is how girls tend to argue. What they tend to do is they say whataboutisms, right? So if you give a generality, a lot of girls will argue and say, yes, but what about this one situation? My girlfriend's brother's step-cousin doesn't do that. But one exception doesn't disprove the rule, but they generalize one exception to the whole population and say that can't possibly be true because I know one exception. Well, okay, there's exceptions to general rules, but they're called general for a reason.
Because we're excited, and even then it's like, you know, people are human, you make mistakes, and sometimes you get carried away because you really like someone. But sometimes it's also just not that obvious because people don't show their sides themselves. Or people are not equipped, they don't have the tools to be able to see those things as red flags and those things as warning signs that they shouldn't get in a relationship with someone. So to me, I feel like it's really, it lacks empathy and lacks compassion for the fact that, you know, a lot of people find themselves in these situations and they don't feel like they, you know, they feel completely blindsided by it.
Yeah, I one of the things that's interesting about narcissistic relationships is how people can be truly, and I would argue rightly, shocked at just what someone else is capable of when the chips are down. That it's quite a simplistic thing to suggest in hindsight, oh, I can draw a line between this thing they used to do that was bad at a 3 out of 10 and this thing they ended up doing which was bad at a level 1000.
Yeah.
But plenty of people do things that are bad at a 3 out of 10. It doesn't mean that they're capable of the devastation that some people are capable of on their worst day.
Indeed.
And you know, I've talked about this with Dr. Ramani before, that idea that a lot of people, when they find themselves in narcissistic relationships, one of the most disorienting, world-shifting, mind-blowing moments is when they realize that on their worst day, someone didn't throw them a life raft, or, you know, they think, oh, but if I was really in trouble, if I was really suffering, this person would show up for me. And then, you know, Dr. Ramani, I know, has stories of people having, you know, cancer and finding that their partner won't even drive them to the hospital.
Yeah, that's crazy. Obviously, that would be insane.
Is completely uninterested, and them going, oh my God. Like, because you don't know how someone's going to react to you having an illness until you have an illness.
And these things happen in increments. They don't happen all at once.
Right.
It's funny you talk about Dr. Ramani. I told you this. I listened to a podcast with her on her podcast, which is called Surviving Narcissism. And
I've heard of this one.
Interviewed Evan Rachel Wood, who is Marilyn Manson's ex-girlfriend and who came out publicly and spoke out about the fact that he was abusive and, you know, all sorts of things.
Why would you date Marilyn Manson? He literally, look at how he looks. Think about the kind of mental illness you need to look like that, right? And then you date him? Like, but no accountability, right? It's all his fault.
And
anyway.
First of all, she was like 18 years old. And secondly, she talks
So an adult female?
At depths and at lengths about the fact that they were friends for a long time and he was really lovely to her, and
Okay.
that, in the
But there weren't any signs, right? Never. No, he was only nice to her. Yeah. He has an edge, and she knew he had an edge, and she went with him anyway.
beginning, he very much just got to know her so well and studied everything about her so that he was the perfect partner.
Oh, she's describing love bombing here.
And it was only after a few months in, when he felt like she was in love and, it was solid, that he started in small ways to change, and the coercive control started, and he started forcing her to distance herself from people and being this, being that. And anyway, if you want the full story, you can listen to the podcast. They will do it justice far better than myself. But
And yet she stayed for how long? 15 years? 20 years? Only when he stopped being alpha did she stop liking him?
it was such a perfect depiction to me of a situation where you cannot blame the victim. You cannot blame the person who was cheated on in that situation or who was abused in that situation.
Actually, you can. If you choose the ghetto gangbanger and then bad stuff happens, I don't know what to tell you. You choose the sketchy guy that looks like a vampire, acts like a vampire, for money no less. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. She's blameless? She's a special snowflake? Come on.
Because he cheated on her as well.
This is Michaela Peterson level of denial.
You can't blame this 18-year-old child who got in a relationship.
She's not a child. Come on. 18. Again, more modern language, right? Unless she has her master's degree, she's still a child. That's where we're getting to. No university level education, she's still a kid. No, she would be a kid at 12 years old, not at 18. Sorry.
With a man who was
A legal adult female made an idiot choice. Doesn't mean she's blameless, doesn't mean she's a kid.
16 years older than her, and quite clearly, allegedly did all these things, and is, just
more attractive, more successful, more money, bigger, stronger, faster, smarter, more successful, more charismatic. Big surprise she got with him. And then after the fact, oh, he was so bad. Oh, he was A-word. Oh, he was R-word. Oh, I'm the victim. Defend me, please, women everywhere.
Well, this is the other thing, right? Especially if you're young, you haven't been given a reason to have a mistrust of what someone is saying and showing you. And many people, they may have been like, well, my last 3 relationships had complete trust. So the first time you meet someone who is very good at making you feel crazy, making you feel like you're doing things wrong or you're upsetting them, they're calling you labels you haven't had, you're like, that for you can be very disorienting and confusing, but you might initially just trust them because you're used to taking people at their word. So so for then it to be like, well, you were naive or whatever, it's like, no, this person was skilled at manipulating a person who was trusting.
Which, by the way, isn't just true of someone who's young. It can be true of someone who just hasn't encountered that kind of animal before.
No,
Exactly.
You could be in your 30s, 40s or 50s and have had relatively healthy... You could
Yeah, this is actually true as well.
have been blessed with relatively healthy people in your life, albeit people who weren't right for you or people you turned out not to be right for, but people who were fairly healthy and suddenly come across... I talk about it in the book. There's a reason why in the chapter... My new book, Love Life, available at lovelifebook.com. There's a chapter there called How to Leave When You Can't Seem to Leave, which is, ostensibly about narcissistic relationships, but it can work for different kinds of relationships. And there's a reason why in the first few paragraphs I talk about narcissists as crocodiles who are not to be treated like dogs. There's an intuitive
Indeed.
nature to how we think about dogs, right? There's a reason why, like, there's a show called The Dog Whisperer from back in the day, because what he came along and did was show that, hey, there's a nature to dogs that we can actually understand. And what I found interesting is how much of what he said about dogs can apply to like children, right? Because it's this
Absolutely true. Yeah. Your frame and your boundary setting. Well, the truth is, children are closer to animals than they are to humans, though they are human. They're just not fully developed humans. So they actually are like dogs. I mean, they're not dogs, but you get what I'm saying. Punishment and reward, a la B.F. Skinner, works very well, right? I mean, with adults too, to an extent.
same thing, like the behavior you reward, and
that's
the
called
love you
operant
give
conditioning.
at the right moments and so on, and how that trains a dog over time. What you show isn't acceptable. A crocodile doesn't give a fuck what's acceptable.
Indeed.
You can't train a crocodile to go, no.
I have this image of you. It reminds me of, you know, when we saw that person walking down our street, walking their giant.
You see, this is solipsism. You see how she relates everything to her own personal perspective. It's all about her. This is solipsism, guys.
Pig.
Yeah.
I have this image of you trying to like walk a crocodile down
There was
the street.
just to give context to that story, me and Audrey were walking to our local coffee shop, and there was a couple, unironically, walking a giant pig down a...
Hilarious. Okay, on that note, let's end the video there. Hit the like, hit the sub, hit all for notifications. Drop me a donation. Like Hunter M, Adrian R, Tom and Bobby, Dylan, Renaissance Press, Brian, Andrew, Alan, Armani, and Nicholas. Shout out to you, most recent purchaser of both my books, Strategist Guide to Seduction and Quotes to Live By. You can find them at bit.ly/heliosbooks. If you'd like coaching, just message me at my email. That's theheliosblog@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, guys, especially if you listen to the end. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.